Hey everybody, my name is Matt Slaughton. I'm a solution architect here at Kasten by Veeam. First, I want to say thank you to Angelbeat for having us on the webinar today focused on DevOps. In my presentation, I would definitely be talking about applications, data analytics, Kubernetes or cloud native, and DevSecOps. So in the sphere of DevOps, I did want to throw in security there because it is so paramount, so important to a DevOps approach to application development. And we'll talk through a little bit about how it's different, why, and what we can do. So, lay of the land, who are we? Why am I here today talking to you? I work for Kasten by Veeam, which is a leader in the Kubernetes backup space. We provide cloud-native backup solutions for Kubernetes applications hosted in Kubernetes. We don't back up Kubernetes, we back up applications in Kubernetes and their data. So, really important differentiator there, but the distinction is important, and I'll talk about why later. Veeam acquired Kasten in October of 2020, essentially recognizing Kasten's strategic advantage in cloud-native backup. We are the industry leader when it comes to Kubernetes backup. And also worth noting, neither Veeam or Kasten, as part of Veeam, we are not a storage company, right? So we're not just basically creating a half-baked backup solution to sell disk or push tin, push metal. We are 100% focused on data protection. That is our core business, and as a result, we invest entirely into creating products that ensure resolute, secure data protection. And what separates us from some of the other players in the space? We are cloud native ourselves, right? So Kasten is actually deployed within the cluster, which affords us a lot of capabilities, opportunity, including but not limited to being able to see the applications next to us, so different namespaces next to us, be able to back those up, protect those, as they spin up or as they spin down. We can leverage things like automation, right? So be able to actually be part of your pipeline to ensure we have data protection from the outset. We'll talk about that later. Also having high security certification, right? So FIPS 140-2, we are FIPS 140-2 enabled. We're using FIPS validated modules in our software. We're actually working on FIPS 140-3 validation as we speak. Leveraging things like Platform One Iron Bank, which is a hardened, secure container repository for our images, so you ensure that we can provide a software bill of materials or SBOM, and that the software supply chain for our solution is clean or not, not at risk with critical CVEs. We offer comprehensive fine-grained security, which ties back a little bit to cloud native, but using things like cluster role bindings or role bindings that are native elements within Kubernetes, but we can leverage within Kasten because we are cloud native and in Kubernetes as well. So with that, let's go ahead and move forward. Let's talk about DevSecOps a little bit and why it is more than just a tool. It's really important to underscore here, and I know we've talked about a little bit today, that DevOps and DevSecOps it's not just a tool, it is both organizational and transformational, right? So it's often overused, but it is important, and it's overused for good reason. We are focused on people, processes, technology. We want to make sure that we are enabling our developers, our organization, our business to essentially match the pace of demand of our customer, right? So I'm not talking about Veeam or Kasten, I'm talking about enterprise or your organization. When you're looking at DevOps, is we want to make sure that we can empower our developers with the velocity, with the agility that they need to be able to release good, high-quality software, but also release software that is secure and that has data protection from the outset. It's really important. We'll talk about how we can do that in a minute. DevSecOps is cross-discipline and fundamentally different than traditional architecture. So I come from more of a traditional infrastructure background, right? So I work a lot in compute storage, virtualization, network. I still do, still like to tool around. It's obviously part of Kubernetes as well. Kubernetes is layered often on top of some computer somewhere, whether it's a public cloud, private cloud, on premises. But Kubernetes is also fundamentally different, and that is fully app focused, right? We're not focused just on, I shouldn't say just, we're not focused on infrastructure layer. We're elevating and the paradigm that we're focusing on in terms of our applications and core business. So it's really, kind of a shift a little bit, almost on its head around what we focus on and how we can protect these applications. It can't be accomplished overnight. There is no big red button that says do DevSecOps. It is an evolution. So if you or your organization are trying to achieve DevSecOps, that's awesome, good for you, but don't expect results overnight. It is, it's a process, right? You have to define new processes, and you have to look at our organization and maybe look at it through a different light or different lens to accommodate the DevSecOps model. And as a result, there is no one tool, right? I wish I could say buy Kasten, and that then once you buy Kasten, you are doing DevSecOps. That is not the case. We are part of the ecosystem. We play very nicely within DevSecOps as a process. You look at things like CI/CD automation, policy automation, all of that, which again we'll talk about here in a minute. We work great in that scenario, but we are not a panacea. I talked about how it's organizational. You see here to the left, we had our kind of traditional security or developers, infrastructure security. We have to turn that a little bit on its head and look at it more from an application or business outcome perspective with DevSecOps, right? We want to focus on how can we, again, improve velocity and agility without sacrificing security. And a lot of that is having those cross-discipline teams. So we don't have those same silos that maybe we had before that worked better in a traditional infrastructure or virtualization environment. It's a little bit different with cloud-native technologies because of the focus on the application. Some high-level numbers for you based on a recent survey performed by Veeam. We perform it every year, and it's not just of our customers. It's essentially to a large number of organizations across the globe. So this is kind of a good beat of what organizations are seeing and feeling today and what they're focused on. So moving kind of clockwise, top left, 74% of organizations think that traditional and container-based applications can be backed up the same way. As you can see on the slide, they can't, right? If they could, we could use Veeam VBR, which is our backup and replication tool to be able to protect those workloads. We just back up the VMs and call it a day. Unfortunately, Kubernetes doesn't work that way, right? Kubernetes, there are ephemeral components. There are components that can live on one node 1 minute, but then either live on a number of nodes or move to another node the next minute, right? So be able to accommodate that and ensure that we can accommodate that new architecture as well. 85% of companies experience at least one ransomware attack in the past year. This number is rising as well, which is disconcerting. I see it in my home lab, actually, my firewall. I get a number of hits of threat actors knocking on my door pretty much daily. And it's not just Windows anymore, right? So we're actually seeing threat actors target new technologies like Kubernetes. They're looking for indicators that someone is using an emerging or new technology because they understand that there's not the same security controls in place, there's not the same data protection in place, and they realize that they might be able to catch some organizations flat-footed. So be aware of that as we talk about DevSecOps and how it can fit into automation pipelines. 75% of organizations indicate a skill shortage in their Kubernetes backup and recovery teams. So really important there is, we're all understaffed, right? I'm sure you guys feel it. I certainly feel it. It's not a knock on Veeam. It's just kind of the way the world is. Much in the same way it's not a knock on many other organizations, right? It's just a matter of that we have a lot to do, and especially in kind of these new and emerging technologies. We're talking about DevOps or DevSecOps. There's again that cross-pollination, cross-discipline that we need to make sure that we are enabling our key personnel with the right tools and making it as easy as possible so that they can focus on core business and not have, or focus on enabling the core business and not have to kind of deal with, the click ops or, having to type the same thing over and over again, right? So then there's a whole conversation there about AI, but we're not getting into that, the two letters that no one hears these days. And then moving to the left, 93% of organizations think that multi-cloud support for container backup is important because it is, right? So we need to make sure that we are not locked into one particular cloud. We need to be able to accommodate a multi or hybrid cloud scenario, right? So maybe we want to use one public cloud provider and another one for high availability, or maybe one public cloud provider is less expensive for one workload and the other one's less expensive for another workload. Or maybe we are a retailer and, 8 months of the year we're fine just running on premises in our data center, but for those other 4 months we want to be able to burst and accommodate additional transactions. We can do that with a hybrid cloud approach as well. So be able to make sure we accommodate that. Really important. So why are we here today? Why are we even talking about data services on Kubernetes or cloud-native applications? I thought Kubernetes was all ephemeral. It was back in 2016, before there were persistent volume claims, things like persistent storage. Since last 5 years, we've seen a widespread adoption of more persistent data workloads in cluster next to the applications, and for good reason, right? So again, not to kind of read this to you, you guys can read, but here are some of the good reasons. Is just intuitively co-location and migration. Think about that hybrid multi-cloud. We need to move our data with our applications. We need to make sure that we're not calling a database that's way over on one side of the globe, from an application that's deployed on the other side of the globe. We're going to have performance issues. So there's a benefit to having that data in our cluster. Testability, copy data management, right? So be able to take data and spin it up in a secure bubble to test new code. We know that our new code will work if we can make it work with its production data, but without actually impacting production. And then once we validate, confirm our tests, we can spin down that namespace or blow it away and then roll out that code update to production. So again, driving that agility and velocity among our developers. App and schema versioning, be able to protect our applications and data in the same point of time. If we have schema changes, think of Mongo too, which there is no real schema sometimes with Mongo. Maybe you get in a state where you've protected your application, but 5 minutes later you protect your database or vice versa, and you might have a mismatch then of the app state and our data state. So be able to accommodate that, making sure we have a good known point in time that we can recover to in the event of accidental deletion, some sort of ransomware attack, what have you. Polyglot persistence is my favorite one because it's fun to say. It's an alliteration, but all that means is freedom to adopt purpose-built data services. So in this example, we've got workloads here running Postgres as well as Mongo. Whoops, I'm getting ahead of myself. Postgres and Mongo, and making sure that we have the ability to accommodate those different datas for the right job, right? So maybe one workload in our application suits way better for Mongo for performance, or we don't need relations in our database, whereas another, we want to be able to have that relationship within a traditional SQL database. So having that. And lastly, cost, right? We've invested in this infrastructure or this cloud spend. We're already running our applications there. Why can't we also host our data there? So we need a solution that can offer data recovery, data security, data freedom. I wonder what solution that could be. Hey guys, I'm Matt. I work for Casted by Veeam. We are a great solution. Here's a great use case that we have highlighted recently. It's a little bit scant on details and for good reason, but just to note here, this is talking about bleeding edge, is deploying cloud native workloads at the tactical edge, right? So looking on things like, ships or, maybe on, temporary bases, and be able to make sure that we can move data and have that network-centric capability to ensure that our defense has essentially any data anywhere, anytime that it's needed, right? So the Navy, we were working with the Navy using products like Kasten to help enable that securely as well. So, the Navy recognizes the ability to be able to quickly release new updates to applications, right? So, I'll let your minds wander in terms of what that might be, but making sure that we have the security in place and data protection in place that should something happen or, they need to move workloads quickly, we have a data protection solution in place that can accommodate that. So a little bit deeper on Casted by Veeam, keeping an eye on time here. I got a few minutes left. So we are, like I said, we are cloud native. We are Kubernetes native, which means we're deployed in cluster, which affords us a lot of capabilities that some of our competitors may not have. So again, maybe it sounds like, what does that matter? It does matter a lot because we're able to leverage Kubernetes resources, Kubernetes scaling, right? So when we perform backups, for example, we'll spin up the number of pods or workloads that we need to actually perform the backup, move the data off, but once we're done, we can basically give those resources back. So again, we embrace the cloud native architecture, be able to see namespaces next to us. We talked about that testing where maybe we want to clone a namespace or clone our data to test. We can see the namespaces next to us and protect them. And also high velocity environment. Sometimes these new applications get spun up and spun down quickly, and be able to have it as an application that can recognize that, protect it automatically, and when it's time to tear it apart, can do that automatically. Very important. Security everywhere, things like end-to-end encryption. We actually can't turn off encryption. There's no way to do it when we send data off the cluster. So if we're sending to something like S3 or S3 compatible storage, like MinIO or a NetApp, or could be a vast array, what have you. Anything that supports S3 APIs, we can support as a backup target. Where we can actually send that data, and we support immutability, right? So in the case of ransomware, we know we have a known good backup. So if an attacker gets into our cluster or it gets into our network, we know that our data that we've backed up previously is unaffected, because once it's written, it's only written once, right? The worm, write once, read many. Ease of use, this goes back to our stat earlier, about 75% of organizations being understaffed. We want to make sure that we enable our administrators, enable our DevOps engineers to be able to quickly recover in the event of an accidental deletion, ransomware attack, or just, be able to test earlier code. So, I've definitely been in the seat before where, the metaphor there is something bad hits the fan, and we want to make sure we can recover quickly. I don't want to sit there and have to fiddle with scripts or write something or check and make sure. I just want to be able to get that up quickly, and that way I don't have the business knocking down my door saying, "Where is this? Why is this not up, Matt?" It's really important that we enable ourselves with the best tooling. And of course, full ecosystem support. Again, we are not a storage company. We don't sell storage. We focus on data protection. So what does this look like in CI/CD pipeline? We have our traditional CI portion, continuous integration, our traditional app security, so things like SAST, SCA, IAC, but also policy as code. So they give the examples, my developers are releasing a new application. We want to ensure that we are applying backup policy, data protection policy, that as the application is released, we're protecting that application. Or maybe we trigger a backup just before a new new version is released, right? In case anything breaks, we can quickly roll back. So that scenario. And of course, continuous deployment, CD, is leveraging tools to be able to roll this out, right? So think again of that tactical edge, deploying to edge, be able to update and test prior to rollout, automating that deployment and automating that cleanup, and having things like multi-cloud support, multi-cluster management for that multi-hybrid cloud. I'm just about at time, guys, so I'm going to move very quickly to this last section. I just want to highlight here's a number of ecosystem partners. You probably recognize some of these logos. So wide ecosystem support. I'm going to shoot through this. We talked about security already. High level, how can Veeam help you? Definitely check out Kasten by Veeam, which can provide cloud-native data protection, data mobility solutions. And the first 5 nodes are on me. So if you have a 5-node cluster, fully featured, you can download us, deploy us on your cluster today. And for more info, definitely reach out, guys. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Angelbeat. And with that, I will hand it to the next presenter. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.